time to find out what's happened in Mythic Plus this week.
Oh yeah, that's right. There were no affixes this week.
Oh yeah, World of Warcraft broke. It was great. I was going on to Keystone. No, it was Mythic Plus. It's mythic.pl or sorry, mythicpl.us, isn't it?
Yep.
And it was like, what bullshit do I have to deal with this week? Nothing.
Yeah.
This week's affixes are not there. Yeah, so a bit of a mix-up on NA servers that caused a lot of confusion because there were no affixes in any keystones. No score was awarded, but you still could get the Mythic plus 20 Keystone Hero dungeon teleports by just doing a plus 20 stone that had nothing.
Grim. And remember, that's not just like, hey, there's no volcanic or there's no thing. There's no tyrannical or fortified, which means a massive amount of the scaling is also gone.
Yeah, so here's Tattle's just having a Nathalorus 24. It's just health and damage.
Yeah.
A lot of health and damage, but yeah. Right, we got a tip. We've got a tech tip.
Yeah.
What is our tech tip today? One of the hardest dungeons in the current pool, especially at higher keys. Any slight advantage is a huge boon. Many players may have forgotten the old Cataclysm archeology buff you could obtain inside the original dungeon, the Whisper of the Djinn, which persists through death. It can be acquired by using a Tolfir hieroglyphic keystone. Oh my god, there's keystones in our keystones. On the magical brazier inside the dungeon. And it's there. You don't actually need to have the archaeology skill, you just need the hieroglyphic. I imagine they're surging up in the auction house a little bit. And here's what you get. Regenerates health and mana every 3 seconds for the whole dungeon. That's great. I can just have a cup of tea.
Sweet.
Be
That's
done.
all right, like.
And as for our dungeon tier list, I don't want to shock anyone, but...
Wow.
Oh my god! Look at that! Nathalorus isn't the hardest dungeon.
Yeah.
It's Uldaman.
That's because Uldaman's bosses are really interesting. I think where Uldaman, a high tyrannical, will just delete you if you make a mistake. Okay?
Yeah. Oh yes, the Afflicted buff.
It's busted.
Yes, it is very trivial if your group comp has the things that you need. If it does not, it is no longer trivial. Especially because those dispels and off healing and stuff can be competing with what you already need to do in a boss fight that's like pretty challenging in terms of its tuning. And I think Blizzard would then say, well, yeah, that's the point. It's to make it harder.
Literally
and
is, yeah.
The reason why we don't require dispel, we give you the option to heal it, is so you have that flexibility. And then I think for players, it's just like the way that this eats up a vital piece of utility that I may have to use in a boss fight. Or I suppose for some players, even just the way I've got to say, use a global and think about that instead of just sachet left. Or, whatever from like a Storming or something. It's about feel and texture, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, it's as Dacker points out here, like the major issue is you go, okay, well, theoretically, if you've got members in your party who are doing it, which I would suggest is probably a reasonably small percentage of the overall M plus DPS like player base, especially if you're pugging, who will actually look at this and go, yeah, I can dispel that, no worries. They'll just be sitting there staring at their meters, like, that gif of the sweating dude hammering his keyboard, just that, trying to do damage, which means your healer now has to do, like, to be fair, you could argue, well, it's maybe a healer job, but they also have to do their own job, which is really hard. And it's like that kind of the issue with, hey, there's a healer affix. And it's when it's a healer affix, it's kind of a problem. When it gets hard enough, low keys, or when the healer's, got all the time in the world, yeah, you can do whatever you want, and the healer will sort it out. It's just those like the Venn diagram of your DPS players are kind of shitty or the wrong class, and your healer's overburdened, which is going to happen in Tyrannical, then it's the problem. All right, sweet, never mind. I guess we're just screwed, which is really annoying because it's likely a pretty rare occurrence, but the people it'll hit the worst will be people who are pugging high keys, which means they'll be the ones screaming about it really loudly. And they also don't have a solution.
I've put myself in hell. Why is it uncomfortable?
Exactly. Whereas obviously it's like, Falsger says, Rats don't do it, Ferals don't do it, Moon Boys don't do it, Monks don't do it, Shadows don't do it. your people of these don't do it.
Moon boys.
No, I haven't.
I'm gonna call you a moon boy from now on.
Ah, please.
Matt started having to go moon boy because of his single target DPS. His kitty is not happy.
Yeah, so I think like this is a case where I would definitely do this all the time. If I did, I haven't done M+ this week, so been off work and bought Street Fighter 6. But ultimately, like, yeah, that would be pretty handy. I would like to do it, but if other people just like don't do it, you're like, all right, sorry, it's what are you gonna do? Players aren't doing the job because Blizzard gives them a slightly more complicated job than hit your buttons properly, and this is the thing that keeps happening. They're like, here's some complexity, and some players go, complexity, just the thing I was looking for. I was having a tiny little bit of boredom just from having to do the same thing over again. I really appreciate this, thank you. And other people scream, complexity, that gets in my way. I want my loot. I want my keystone hero. And you have to find somewhere in the middle ground. And that's the whole thing of affixes, should they exist, that we talked about ad nauseum. And I was like, yeah, here's a little bit of one where it's just like, here's all the downsides of an affix. At least publicly, I'm sure there's a lot of people. But I guess that's the thing, right? If the affix is... If you enjoy the affix and it's fine, you're not going to scream about it. You're going to smile and play your video game. But if you just had a run destroyed because the healer was like, I can't dispel the afflicted, I can't heal or dispel the afflicted because I've had to dispel the tank and heal everyone at the same time.
It's also like the way that they appear on like those shitty little nameplates that are small.
Yeah.
And actually, I didn't know he's done this, but Quasi.
Yeah. So we're talking about this
our
game.
boy Quasi has done basically a player profile. I check out his YouTube channel. I think he rose to prominence in the era of like Shadowlands falling apart and him having a lot of fun in FF14, if I remember correctly. Was it him?
I can't remember.
I think it was him. But anyway, point is, Plater is fucking Biss. Plater can probably play the game for you at this stage. All you really need is Weaker and Plater.
Yeah, the UI Plater.
Dementia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is Dementia Simulator.
It's rough. Yeah, no, that's good. Check that out. I very much like Plater for... There's one specific thing I added, which is fantastic. Oh, yeah, they have a thing called Ghost Auras, which is an aura that shows if it's not on. Like a grayed out version. So if you're the person who forgets to dot, you immediately then go, oh, well, I can see my dot isn't there, as opposed to nothing's there. So I can just look and go, oh, there's no rip in that target because it shows rip above their head, but grayed out. I'm like, oh, or sorry, not rip, Rick. I'm like, easy, sweet, fantastic, no problem.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Yeah, indeed, and it's funny, you see so many of the games that people play with the same play pattern that WoW kind of has about, like, the repeat, which we've actually had fun with in this season of Mythic Plus.
Trust.
In games like that, it's very much like, it's you and your gun and Destiny. You don't need to track that shit. Or it's you swirling about the place while numbers explode in an ARPG. Whereas with WoW, it's like, there's a lot more, like, complex tracking and kind of funky business going on.
Yeah, I'm going to put a little bit of a dampener on that just because I think anyone who plays Destiny at the high end will say their buff tracking is utterly atrocious and nightmarish. And as soon as that becomes slightly more important, then it's a complete nightmare.
Fair
I think,
point.
like,
Yes,
even
I accept that, yeah.
my time in D4 so far, and not that I've played much of the game, like level 51, I'm just doing some World Tier 3, like Nightmare Dungeons and Helltide stuff. Like, yeah, tracking everything that's happening to me is actually difficult, especially when you start to add a whole bunch of different, because the core class stuff is really clean. And then you're like, here's like a unique or two uniques, and then all your legendary in every slot, half of them with like, interesting effects that you have to keep up, and you're like, how do I track all these? And obviously the point is you kind of don't need to, most of them. But then you look at your buff bar and you're like, oh my Christ. It's like default LVI icon stuff again, where you're like, oh, there's 27 icons, I don't know any of them are. It's a really deep fundamental problem that like almost all of these games have UI design properly. As soon as you add complicated elements, it's like, what do you do?
I almost wonder, you look at some of those more simple but deep games that still are very successful mass market, like your GTAs, your Red Deads, your God of Wars, your Elden Rings, where You know, all of this just like the game designers have applied layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of game design to the thing that you're doing. There's like a lot of games that are more, you know, actually quite minimalist and simple.
Hit the thing. Press the button.
And I don't mean minimalist and simple in a bad way, to be clear. I mean like calibrated correctly.
Yeah.
It's that thing I always think about with the Dark Souls games, and I actually compare it to Vanilla WoW sometimes, where because Vanilla WoW is like more slow paced and based on white damage, you're focusing on so much less. Therefore, like, you know, you're clenching at the swing timer, thinking, "Oh God, am I gonna get it? I don't know."
Yeah, except for the fact that you don't have a swing timer because it just swings.
No, yeah. I remember playing Blood DK with a swing timer in 5.4. That was fun. Also, there's then the Nathalris and Vortex Pinnacle hotfixes of last week. I covered them in the WoW News, but basically good, things as well. It's just really a continuation of a broad theme, which is this modern Blizzard is actually really on top of their shit when it comes to stuff in the game, and that's great. Actually feels like WoW will get better, and if there are problems, they will become better. It's like the mages weren't happy for ages, and now we have a mage rework coming. That's lovely.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Hunter's next. I don't want to be like, you gave the mages one, where's my rework? I understand everything takes time. It's just nice to know that they'll probably get around to it.
At this rate, I imagine, and this is the thing where you could argue, well, okay, some people are in two minds about it just because, well, there's been no news, which means we can't expect much. And then you look at what's happened with, was it Flex? I think Flex said this because they were the one who was posting on like Twitter consistently about mages just holding up Bulwark, but like day 27 of no arcane rework, whatever it was. And just went, actually, never mind. We thought the mage dev was asleep for half a year or hibernating. No, they were cooking the whole time. They were actually like, they were sat down and they did things properly. So I feel like hunters have a more substantial rework, but it will be more divisive if they were to do it. Because I think people are kind of happy, as pointed out by so yeah, obviously, like, people are happy with it.
I think it's one of those things.
Minor changes will do it.
As a class, a lot of people have played Hunter for a very long time. Yeah. Hunters have chopped and changed so much. We had obviously the revamp as we left Wrath of the Lich King, right? So we were revamped as we went into Cataclysm with a new resource. Things obviously changed up a little bit in Mists of Pandaria. There was then supposed to be more of a revamp in Warlords of Draenor. That didn't happen. Then we got a revamp in Legion. Then we got a revamp in Battle for Azeroth. Then we got refined a bit. And now we've been refined again. But I think the core directions that BFA went in, not everybody was pleased with. So it's an interesting thing with that class. Whereas I think there are some classes that have more solidified around a core design for longer.
Yeah, certainly.
It's particularly important.
Certainly, I think one of the more challenging reworks, and that's maybe why it's in the bottom of the totem pole generally.
For all we know, they could have been working on it for a while, and they just haven't quite got it yet, and they're not ready to talk about it because they don't want to set, expectations, lead people on, or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Or they could they could think Hunter's perfectly fine.
Or that.
Which they definitely don't, because survival hunters in the just in the bog all the time, consistently. Unless it's extremely flavor of the month. Hello, Shadowlands Season 4.
Yeah.
But that's kind of they probably don't like that. It's like, what are you, flavor of the month or useless? But yeah, I'm sure there's something that works.